Hello, thank you for joining me here at Bert's Books. It's been a bit of a downbeat time of year, I suppose, in that just this last week, really, we've had to say goodbye to a few people. Now, on the musical front, of course, it's been a sad farewell to Shane MacGowan, the Pogues and Popes fame. We've had to say goodbye to Geordie Walker, a guitarist with Killing Joke, and we've had to say goodbye to Dean Sullivan, who of course was the man who played Jimmy Corkhill in Brookside. Now, Dean, I think, first appeared as the character around about 86, perhaps. It was a slightly peripheral role at first. He was like the brother of, the Corkhill, Billy Corkhill and family were residents of the close, and Jimmy was the kind of disreputable or more disreputable brother who proved a popular character, and his appearances became more regular until he sort of fused as a permanent cast member. And I think, in fact, maybe one of the longest running, if not the longest running, Brookside cast members. But anyway, Dean, I suppose he would have been round about his early 30s at that point. He brought something to that role. His previous experience, I believe he'd worked as a school teacher, which presumably served him in sort of later Jimmy plot lines. Jimmy sort of embarked on what he hoped would be a career as a school teacher. And I think Dean had worked on stage productions for which he'd crossed paths with Phil Redmond. But in the role as Jimmy, I think I probably touch on this. So, I some time ago, as part of my Now and Again Bookside series dealing with Brookside-related novels, of course, we dealt with this, the novelisation of Jimmy's misadventures up to around, I think this probably takes us up to about 1994 or 5. So plenty went on after as well. But Dean brought something to this role. There was something about Dean Sullivan's handling of this role that made you just kind of hang in there, and somehow, I mean, Jimmy Corkhill isn't the most obvious character on paper that you'd be rooting for. He's a habitual petty criminal who sort of graduates from the petty stage of it, I suppose, the deeper in he gets, with his various vices, culminating in some pretty harrowing storylines sort of from the mid-90s, around the mid-90s. On the face of it, he's quite often described by other characters as a no-mark and all kinds of scumbag at points. But Dean managed to infuse that role with this level of humanity and believability that there's always this little spark of redeemability about Jimmy, no matter how in deep he gets with the shit that he gets into. I mean, there's one point in here he's responsible, on one of his fabled drug binges of the mid-90s. He's responsible for a car crash which effectively takes out not only Frank Rogers but takes out Ron Dixon's kid, Lil Tony. So, he's not really a character you'd think you'd be rooting for, and Dean Sullivan somehow elevated this, on the face of it, no-mark loser sort of figure to someone you just constantly found yourself rooting for, and you wanted him to win through. And I don't know what it was. There might be this, I mean, it's certainly evident in here about it's well written by Rachel Braverman, this element of Jimmy that he's not so much a bad guy as just not well equipped in his own impulse control, and he's just afflicted with this very childlike belief that the next fuck-brained scheme that he lands on to make a few quid, that this one will win through. It's like, it's like he is in the bookies. It's like, oh, this time it will be all right. There's something so childlike about it, but it's kind of oddly appealing. And I think throughout, at least the glory days of Brookside, when there was a sort of, I think, deterioration in the last maybe 3 or 4 years of the soap. I don't think we can pin that on any of the actors, rather that I think probably more a flaw in the scripts rather than any of the actors' contributions. You certainly can't point a finger at Dean Sullivan for the the series declined. But during he had a good few years of that series being, I'm not even somebody who bothers with soaps. I never, until Brookside came on, I never bothered watching a soap opera. It was like the soap for people that didn't bother watching soaps. It was an element of being the kind of almost like punk rock of soap. It was like that. The punk generation was sort of hooked in by Brookside. I think Phil Redmond was probably quite instrumental in that. But what I'm garbling around, I'm talking around the point as ever. I think. Dean Sullivan, there's a good few years when Brookside was like this flagship, and he was very much at the centre of that. The strongest kind of performances and storylines when Brookside was, this must-watch for me throughout a point, a stretch of the 90s, leading up towards the end of the decade. Dean Sullivan's performance was very much at the centre of that, and the character of Jimmy Corkhill was just absolutely central to that. So yeah, very sad to see him go. I can't say I ever met him or anything like that, but when not in the role, and he did come across, he seemed a sort of genuine, likeable human being, I suppose. And all right, art and a person's life aren't the same, but you sometimes have to think what somebody brings to a performance. And there has to be a reflection in some way of who they are and what they can pull from within themselves as a person. So yeah, in the meantime, we still have these weekly uploads, 5 episodes on STV every Wednesday. We're not yet at the stage where Jimmy appears, but I think we're up to the end of 1984 now, so we've got about a year and a bit's worth of episodes before we can expect to see Dean there. But I'm looking forward to that, looking forward to reliving the Corkhill years, and I'm sure everyone will have their own sort of particular favourite. I think that particularly that drug addiction storyline had a lot of people galvanised. Pardon the expression, the highs and lows of Jimmy's mid-90s, his triumphs and his slipping on the banana skin, if you like. But there's one clip, I couldn't find it on YouTube last time it looked, I don't know if it's come down, but there was one clip of Jim, prime Jimmy, you might say, not the most tasteful or savoury, what do you expect, but of his moments, but certainly memorable, which is the occasion, I guess it's probably from 95-ish, where Bing Crosby has organised a VE day party on the Close. Jimmy, you can't say he doesn't make an effort, but makes a perhaps ill-judged appearance at this. And I ran across the clip on YouTube a few years ago, and my bottom jaw was on the floor. But we'll all have our favourite, but there will be many, many favourite moments. So anyway, I hope I can get organised to revisit Bookside, and actually there are more novels, there are more book spin-offs. I'm happy I did this one anyway while he was alive. It would be lovely to think he ever saw it. I've no idea, but we'll all have our classic Jim moments. So thank you, Dean. Thank you for the wonderful work. He's presumably reunited with Cracks. So God bless him anyway, Dean Sullivan.